Dollar Tree French onion soup in a bread bowl. I'd say that's a win. Hi, good morning and welcome back. The other day I was shopping around Dollar Tree and I stumbled across these Campbell's flavor ups. They are, I think, some sort of a bouillon concentrate, kind of like better than bouillon. Or remember those like Knorr little packets that you used to get and they were wrapped in like a foil and you would use them to like as a flavor enhancer for your meals. I don't know if they still sell those or not. But I assume that these are kind of like Campbell's version of that. And they're being sold at Dollar Tree right now. I assume possibly because they're being discontinued or maybe it was an overstock situation. But it is a bargain because they are between $3 and $5 at other stores. There are 3 different flavors. There is a garlic and herb, caramelized onion with burgundy wine, and a savory mushroom and herb. So because Dollar Tree inventory is a bit like a revolving door, and sometimes you will find little gems like this, I thought it would be fun to share some ways to use some of these. And so today, specifically, I'm going to be using the caramelized onion flavor. I thought we may be able to try to use this to make a Dollar Tree version of a French onion soup. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and let's go ahead and get started. Now, French onion soup is typically topped with a nice slice of crusty bread along with some cheese, and then it's broiled. Well, Dollar Tree doesn't sell many types of bread. They do have their sandwich bread, but no like baguettes or anything like that. So we are going to make a really simple Irish soda bread. So you saw there I had 1% milk and I put a cup into a measuring cup. To that I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. I'm going to give that a quick stir and I'm going to set it aside for about 5 minutes while we work on the rest of the ingredients. This is a substitute for buttermilk in the event that you don't have buttermilk or you can't get a hold of it, like they don't sell buttermilk at Dollar Tree. Into a separate bowl, I'm going to sift 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of baking soda and a half a teaspoon of table salt. And we're going to just lightly sift this all together. You're going to kind of treat this like you are making biscuits. Make a well in the center of your bowl and add in your milk mixture. I'm not going to add the entire cup of milk quite yet. I'm going to see how wet it is, and if I need to add more, I can. My mixture is still a little bit wet, so I'm going to add just a little bit more flour to try to form it into a dough ball. And I'm going to turn this out onto my countertop here and make sure everything is well combined. I'm not really kneading the bread here, but I am just trying to make sure all of that flour is incorporated. And I still want a relatively soft dough. So be careful not to add too much flour. I'm going to plop my little dough ball onto a parchment lined baking sheet and dust the top of it with a little bit more flour. And then using a sharp knife, you're going to cut a T shape into the top of your loaf. So you end up with something that looks like this. I've preheated my oven to 450 degrees and I have a skillet. This is a cast iron skillet in the bottom of my oven. You can use any metal pan, but what we're going to do is we're going to turn down the heat on the oven to 400 degrees. We're going to drop some water in this pan to create a steamy environment, and then we're going to throw our loaf in there and let it bake for about 20 minutes. So it's actually been a couple of hours since I last checked in with you, and I baked my soda bread for 20 minutes and it's perfectly golden brown, and I've been letting this cool. I started this earlier in the afternoon so that it can cool completely before we get started on dinner. So as far as the actual French onion soup goes, I have 2 bags of Dollar Tree frozen pepper stir fry. And if you think I'm gonna go through the process of picking out all of the bell peppers out of this just so I'm left with onions, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm gonna do. So let's get started on that. I am hoping that each of these bags has more onions than peppers in them so that I have a good amount of onions to make my soup with, because I only have 2 bags. But as far as I can tell, I should have enough onions once all the peppers are picked out. I have separated out the onions from the peppers, and we're just answering the questions that nobody asked, which is what's the ratio of peppers to onions in the Dollar Tree pepper stir fry, and I'd say it's about 50-50. So honestly, I think I have enough onion to make a small batch of soup. It's not going to make a lot, but I'll set these peppers aside. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and take the peppers and put them back in a bag, and I will have them for a future video, I'm sure. So if you have any suggestions on how I can use all of these diced up peppers, besides like making an omelet or something like that, leave them in the comments below. Now, as far as the rest of the soup ingredients go, I'm going to be using some oil and some flour, but I also have my caramelized onion flavor up, and I have some beef broth. The flavor up isn't super clear on the usage instructions. It does say to just add 1 tablespoon per dish, and I spent some time doing some research online, but it's, again, not very clear. Do you use it in addition to broth? Do you use it in place of broth? I'm not really quite sure, so we're just winging it and we're just gonna see how it turns out, but I think I am going to use it in addition to broth. So on my stovetop, I have a pot with about 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, and I'm heating this up over medium-low heat-ish, and I'm gonna add in my frozen onions. And we are just going to let this cook down and soften up the onions and then begin to caramelize them. So around 5 minutes in, and we're starting out at this stage where there is a lot of water in the pan, and that's because these are frozen vegetables and we have to get rid of all of the ice and liquid that they're frozen with. So it's going to take a little while to evaporate off all of this water, but then once it's all evaporated, they will start to caramelize. It's been about 15 minutes now, and all of the extra liquid has evaporated off, and my onions are starting to brown up, so I'm going to give them another 5 to 10 minutes or so to really get them some good color on them. But I am going to reduce the heat. I had to up the heat slightly to evaporate off that liquid, and I don't want to burn the onions. You do want to cook them kind of low and slow, so I've lowered it back down to medium-low. So caramelizing onions, as you can imagine, is quite a lengthy process. I am about 30 minutes into this, and my onions are just about done. But it does take some time, and it does take some patience. But if you like French onion soup, this is a good way to make it from Dollar Tree. Alright, our onions are pretty much done, and we can go ahead and move on to the next step. I'm going to sprinkle in 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And just like making a roux, we're going to let that cook for a few minutes to cook out the raw flour taste. Now from here, I'm going to start adding in some beef broth. I'm going to add it about a cup at a time because I don't want to add too much, because we don't have a whole lot of onions here, and that's okay. There was our first round of beef broth. I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm probably going to add about half of the carton total. The carton has 4 cups in it, so it's about 2 cups of beef broth. And I'm also going to add in the caramelized onion concentrate, about a tablespoon of that. I did taste it a little bit off camera and kind of played around with the dilution ratios, and it seemed like a tablespoon was a pretty good amount. It didn't make things like overly salty. I did just add it to some water. I added 1 tablespoon to a cup of water, and I thought it was a really good flavor and gave it some depth. So I think that in this application, it's just going to make the broth better. I do think that these are more of a broth enhancer than they are a broth replacer. And I'm going to add in maybe about a cup more beef broth into that, just so we can add some volume into our soup. And then we are going to let this come up to a boil and just kind of let it simmer for about 20 minutes. Now, while I have been going through this arduous process of caramelizing the onions, I have been watching a ton of videos of other people making French onion soup, and I stumbled across one where they made it in a bread bowl. And now that's all I want to do. I just want to make this in a bread bowl. And I think that this size soda bread that I made earlier is going to be the perfect size to make a bread bowl. So we're going to change course, and that's what we're going to do instead. So to make the bread bowl, we are going to cut off the top of our soda bread. This is cooled completely, so it's not very hard to cut off. And I'm using a serrated knife. Oh no, it's doughy on the inside. That's fine. It's a bread bowl. So I think the hardest part about making any sort of homemade bread is just waiting for it to cool. So I'm going to go ahead and also remove the inside from our bread bowl. And unfortunately, this is a little bit doughy on the inside. I probably should have cooked it at 450 for 20 minutes or cooked it slightly longer at 400. I did cook a loaf earlier today. I just want to show you. This was technically my second attempt at the soda bread. This one was my first attempt, and I cooked it in a loaf pan, and it cooked perfectly fine at 20 minutes. So a loaf is also an option if you're doing the soda bread as opposed to the bowl essentially. But I am going to pull out any of the kind of doughy bits, the raw, uncooked bread, and that's fine because, like I said, it kind of worked out perfectly because I decided I wanted to do a bread bowl anyways. So the fact that this isn't cooked all the way through, that's a way of salvaging it, I guess you could say. I mean, it's a mistake I didn't know about until just now, but we can pull all that out and it's going to be totally fine. We can just cut our little ends because we're going to bake this a little bit more anyways to get these nice and crispy. So in a small bowl here, I'm going to add my little cubes of bread, and I'm going to drizzle them with some vegetable cooking oil. You can season them up with whatever you like. I'm just going to toss them in some pepper. I'm going to toss those to make sure they are coated in the oil and pepper. I am preheating my oven to 400 degrees, so I am going to lay out my little bread cubes and I'm going to bake these in the oven until they are crisp. The final thing that we need is cheese to go on top, and the traditional cheese is Gruyere, but Dollar Tree doesn't sell any fancy cheeses, so I'm just going to use a mixture of cheddar and mozzarella. This is probably going to be more than enough cheese for a single bowl of soup, so I'm going to set this aside while we wait for our bread and soup to kind of finish. My little bread cubes have started to toast up, so I am going to put my bread bowl alongside that and throw some cheese inside the bread bowl. Try to get it along all the edges. This will help to seal also in case our bread roll is a little too shallow. This will help to seal the bottom so the soup doesn't leak out. And I'm going to toss this in the oven as well alongside my little bread cubes. We are almost done with our French onion soup, and honestly, I could not be more excited. This is so good. I've already tried the soup because I wanted to taste the broth for seasonings, and it was delicious, so I'm very excited to eat this. Obviously, the bread bowl is a little on the short side, so it doesn't really hold a lot of soup, but I think it's still going to be delicious. And then we can throw some of our little bread cubes on top, lose some soup inevitably over the edge there. Top it with some more of our cheese. And I'll pop this back in the oven to melt the cheese on top. Dollar Tree French onion soup in a bread bowl. So I actually almost lost the soup to the broiler because it gets quite hot very quickly apparently. Well, I mean, it's a broiler, but again, this is a new oven. I'm still getting used to it. My old broiler did not broil things nearly as fast as that one does. So it was a close call, but we got the soup. Now we get to try it. I'm really excited for this. I know it's gonna be so hot. Patience. Patience is a virtue I am not very good at when it comes to food. Especially food that I have been cooking for the better part of an hour now. We are ready for my final thoughts. This is a critique not only of my own personal cooking, but of sometimes Dollar Tree ingredients and how I could improve things in the future, or how you could improve things, you know, if you were to recreate something like this. The bread bowl is the clear winner here because all of the bread on the outside stays really crisp and doesn't get soggy like the bread on the inside. And I do feel like when it comes to French onion soup, now I've personally never had it beyond today, to be fair. When it comes to French onion soup, your first couple of bites are going to be your best bites because you have all that bread and melted cheese on top, and then after that you've just got the soup. So if you like French onion soup as it is, then I would probably honestly serve the bread on the side, toast it up the way I did in the oven, top your soup with your cheese or mix in your cheese, and then let every bite have that like crispy, delicious bread. And you're gonna have to give up the aesthetic of this gorgeous melty French onion soup with the bread and the cheese on top. for the sake of having an overall better tasting dish. As far as the soup goes, it is incredibly rich. It has superb depth. I do think that that flavor up added a lot to it as far as like intensifying the flavors of the onions, because we didn't have a whole lot of onions to work with. If you had bought a 2-pound bag of onions, you would have gotten about twice as much as you get with the frozen Dollar Tree pepper stir fry. And of course with that we had to take out all the peppers, so we lost about half the volume. So fiscally speaking, it wasn't entirely worth it compared to just buying onions and making it, but it was a fun experiment on my part and I really enjoyed this. And honestly, I'm kind of a bit of a French onion soup lover now, and I've never had it before today. So if I can go from having never had it to making a Dollar Tree version and enjoying it, to me that's considered a win in my book. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon.